While the humor is not exactly flowing fast and free at the White House, one thing that is always on tap, a healthy dose of distraction. Whether it's Trump's decision to send thousands of troops to the border, his latest fight with a reporter, or his attack on the retired admiral who brought down bin Laden, there's always something to divert the public's attention. And often, it means we miss some of the truly important things, like the ongoing refugee crisis in Myanmar. It's been more than a year since almost 1 million Rohingya Muslims began to flee their homes there, running from what the United Nations has called a, quote, classic case of ethnic cleansing. Entire villages burned, women raped, generations of families brutally murdered. Most who managed to escape landed in crowded camps and settlements in Bangladesh, and inexplicably, Bangladeshi officials recently reached a deal with the Burmese government to start sending refugees back from where they fled. That was supposed to start this month, but after protests at the refugee camps and from UN officials, the deal has been postponed. Still, life in the camps is far from safe, with brutal and often deadly conditions. What little aid and medical treatment that is available has been coming largely from foreign groups. I recently sat down with two of the people behind these efforts. Kel Kelly is the founder of one of those organizations. It's called Humanity Rises. She spent 10 days at a camp clinic in Bangladesh last month. She joins me. Nice to meet you, by the way.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
With the founder of Kayak and Lola Travel, Paul English, who's on the group's board of directors, and joined her for part of that trip. Paul, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you, too.
You know, why is the public so fixated in this country on the plight of Syrian refugees, as they should be, by the way? But at least from my perspective, there's no focus at all on these Rohingya Muslims. What's that about, do you think?
None. It's almost as if the brand awareness, for as crazy as that sounds, is around the Syrians. Because in the refugee camps across Europe, there's refugees from Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, countries from Africa, and all over the place. But I think because of Bashar al-Assad and his horrific, chemical warfare against his own people, it's just gotten more attention in the news.
Can you describe for another minute the conditions? I mean, I just touched on it a minute ago, and because obviously you've been there and I haven't. Describe the conditions
in Bangladesh.
Yes.
So imagine 1.2 million people in 4,000 acres on top of each other, and they've all been on the receiving end of genocide. So for as much as visually it's incredible, that energy, that negative, that sadness and that stripping of dignity and all of those emotions is so palpable you can't help but be consumed with it.
You know, you visited a camp, as I said a couple of minutes ago, Paul, and I read your Facebook post, and you said, my life changed this week. Why? What do you mean?
It was brutal to see. I've been very inspired by the organization Facing History, and as you know, they do great work in the schools, in the public schools, and one of the things they do is they bring Holocaust survivors into the schools to teach the kids that the Holocaust was real and there is evil in the world, and this is what's happened. And what I learned through Facing History is we each have a responsibility to bear witness and to see things not just as they appear on CNN or on GBH, but to see things with our own eyes so we can come back and tell the stories. And it was tough to witness. And What was the toughest thing to witness? We had a woman with us who was interviewing some of the survivors about their experiences, like what happened. It was August 25th, 2017, when the genocide started, about the burning of the villages, the rapes and murders, and listening to those stories. It's just hard to believe that this is happening in this century.
What does Humanity Rises do? What do you do, and what's the goal?
So right now we run a medical clinic in the Balukhali refugee camp in Bangladesh, which is part of the Cox's Bazar big camp. We treat 5,700 refugees a month. We've treated them for everything from rape-induced pregnancies to gunshot wounds to skin infections, eye infections, you name it. And the best part about that is we can treat up to 5,700 refugees for $20,000 a month, $3.50 a refugee.
Are there governments that are doing anything?
There are governments that will fund some of the larger organizations. As you can imagine, Donald Trump hasn't given me any money, but But there are some governments that actually fund some of the bigger
Well,
ones.
I want to get to Trump for a minute, because at least from my long-distance perspective, the administration, at least through the vice president, has actually said a few good things here. Maybe one of you can explain a mystery to me, this whole Suu Kyi thing, who's the de facto leader since 2016. Most of us were introduced to her, I think it was 91, but about that time when she wins the Nobel Peace Prize, huge champion of human rights, standing up to the ruthless, sadistic generals. And now she's not only not standing up to them, she's standing aside so they can do what you're both describing. What happened in that quarter of a century?
I have no idea. She's turned a blind eye, and even worse than that, she's actually saying that it never happened. It's clearly happened. There is video footage that it's happened. I don't know what happened to her, but the good news is organizations are now stripping her of her humanitarian awards. So I think just last week, Amnesty International ripped one away from her.
And by the way, I said a minute ago, Mike Pence was there last week and met with her, and here's what the vice president had to say to her directly. Please watch.
The violence and persecution by military and vigilantes that resulted in driving 700,000 Rohingya to Bangladesh is without excuse.
By the way, her response, just so you know, of course people have different points of view, but the point is you should exchange those views and learn to understand each other better. In essence, saying to Vice President Pence, he doesn't really understand what the situation is there. I interrupted you. What are you about to say?
Did you see what he didn't say, though? He did not use the word genocide.
But he did say Rohingya, which from my understanding is not what you're supposed to say with Suu Kyi there. Am I wrong about I'm right about that, am I not?
Because they're not recognized and considered stateless, yes, he probably didn't know that. It's genocide. We need to call it what it is. It's genocide.
What's the end game here? Do these people want to go back? I'm assuming under current conditions they don't.
I wouldn't want to go back.
So what is the end game? I mean while you were, thanks to the support of people like you, and thanks to the work of people like you and your colleagues, at least some are getting attended to, but there's got to be something at the end of the line here. What is the end of the line?
Sadly, the life of a refugee is not very attractive. I think it's 17 years on average that people live in refugee camps around the world. So they're here to stay, and God bless the Bangladeshi people for building housing for these people and training doctors and bringing people to the camps to give them basic necessities. But now what we need to do as a community is try to figure out how they can create jobs and schools and
in these refugee
camps. And
is that really the goal, to create essentially cities in those camps?
The reality is that people live in refugee camps for 17 years on average. So what you need to do is try to figure out how to have the best possible living conditions you can do under such circumstances.
What should the United States be doing?
The United States should be calling out the UN, and the UN should be, first of all, banning any arms to go to Myanmar, and that has not been banned. That's still happening. They should be calling it what it is. They should be calling it genocide. They should be holding them accountable, insisting that the UN hold them accountable for crimes against humanity.
But why are they not? Yeah, we all know that one of the reasons why...
And they have to protect the Rohingya, too. They need protection.
One of the reasons we know that Donald Trump doesn't want to take on the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia is, as he said openly yesterday when he's flying to California, we got a lot of deals with these people. What do the generals in Myanmar have that matters some? What kind of extortion do they have to buy inaction on the part of the world? I don't quite get it.
I don't know if they have anything. I don't think they have anything. I think for Trump only acts when there's something that he gets in return, and I don't think he sees anything there. He doesn't. What could they possibly have for him?
And so in the meantime, what real people can do is contribute to efforts like yours, I assume.
Yes.
At the same time, they're talking to their representatives, urging this government to do more for these people, too.
They can contribute to places like Humanity Rises. They can share stories on social media. Honestly, that's just as important. They can advocate. They can correct people if they're out at a party and people are talking about refugees as if they're terrorists who want to enter our country. They're people who fled. They're the people who ran out of the World Trade Center when that plane hit. It would be like us saying, whoa, 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 we don't want to help them because that guy could be, amongst the crowd, which is ridiculous. They're fleeing from being persecuted, in this case, genocide.
We appreciate your work. Thanks so much.
We appreciate you having us here. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot. Great to see you.
Thank you, too. Appreciate it. For more information about their organization, visit humanityrrises.org.